Hello everybody, this is Yoan and today I am back with a new quilting project. I call this project the Surprise Me Quilt Project because there is no actual layout for the half square triangles patchwork. So we're gonna let the blocks to play itself, so the result of each quilt will be one of a kind, just like you. The finished measurements of this quilt are approximately 17.5 inch by 38.5 inch. And for this project, you will need a set of charm pack, the one that has at least 40 pieces of fabric in one set. I recommend to choose the one that has good range of color from the lightest up to the darkest color. Now this one here is in teal color scheme. I've got this set of charm pack from Joann. I'll try to find if I can get the really same product, and I will link that down in the description box. In this video, I'm going to show you also how to make this little triangular hanging sleeve so you can easily place a hanging rod. So I hope you enjoy this little quilt project, and without further ado, let's get started. Alright, first let's prepare our charm pack. You will need 40 pieces of this. Now we're gonna randomly mix up the order of this charm pack. Usually the manufacturer arranges the fabric from the lightest color all the way down to the darkest color. To make the half square triangles, you want to take 2 charm packs in different colors, of course. Lay them right sides together. Now take your ruler and draw a diagonal line, just like so. Now let's pop a couple of pins to secure them in place. And then sew 1/4 inch away from the diagonal line on both sides. I'm sewing with 1/4 inch foot, simply aligning the edges of the presser foot with the diagonal line. If you don't have 1/4 inch foot, you may draw the seam line beforehand and then use regular presser foot. Also, since we're gonna press all the seams open, you may want to decrease the stitch length so that the seams will not come unraveled too easily. Once you've done that, you want to cut right on that diagonal line. You may use scissors or rotary cutter, it doesn't really matter. And there you go. You should end up with 2 half square triangles. Now you can press the seams open. If you've got an awl or stiletto, it may help you to open the seams. And afterwards, I like to dab it with a seam roll just to make it nice and flat. Now we're gonna square this up so that it will measure 4 inch square. So I'm gonna take my square ruler and then I'm going to align the diagonal line of the fabric with the diagonal line of the ruler. So first we're gonna trim off just a little bit to straighten up the edges about 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to flip this to the opposite side. And then this time I'm going to align the edges at exactly 4 inch point and then trim. And there you go. Now I have a half square triangle measuring exactly 4 inch by 4 inch. So we're gonna make in total of 40 half square triangles. To make the most out of my time, I like to work in batches. So I randomly pick 2 5 inch squares and then draw the diagonal line and then sew with chain piecing method, about 5 sets at a time. You can do as many as you want in one batch. It's totally up to you. Here I've got 40 half square triangles. They are already nicely trimmed and pressed. Next, we're gonna arbitrarily sew 2 half square triangles together. Don't think too much about the layout. Simply pick 2 half square triangles and then sew them together. And as you can see, I do chain piecing here to make a speedy sewing. So you should end up with pieces like this. Now again, we're gonna press the seams open. So you should end up with 20 pieces of this. Now we're gonna sew these half square triangle pairs together to make the block. Again, you just want to do this randomly. Don't think too much about the layout. Of course, maintaining 1/4 inch of seam allowance. And as you get to the center, you want to match the seams. You may pop a couple of pins if you want right on the seams. So let's go ahead and continue sewing to make our blocks. And again, you want to press the seams open. So you should end up with 10 blocks, and if everything lays flat, your block should measure 7.5 inch by 7.5 inch. Alright, now we're gonna sew 2 blocks together, and just like before, we're just gonna do this arbitrarily. I know it's very tempting to just lay them out on your design wall so you kind of know what you're getting. But the whole idea of this quilt is to let go of the control, so to speak, and kind of just have fun and embrace the mystery. I think that's where the fun is. But if you really can't help it, it doesn't hurt to lay them out beforehand. And of course, we're going to press the seams right away. Now we should have 5 rectangles, and these are going to be the rows of our quilt. Now let's sew them together. So I'm going to start with these 2. So I'm just going to quickly assess by laying them side by side. Looks pretty good, so I'm just going to go ahead and lay them right sides together. This time I'm going to use some pins to match the seams, and then sew this with 1/4 inch of seam allowance. Now I'm going to sew these 2 together. And there you go. Now let's continue sewing all these rows together. And voila, my patchwork is done, and I am loving the result already. Now let's add the border. So you may follow my measurements, which is there in the PDF that I provided. My border is 2 inches wide, and I use this solid fabric from Kona in navy blue color. So we're gonna sew starting from the longer border. And once you've done that, you want to go ahead and proceed to the rest of the steps of quilting. Here I've already layered my patchwork with the batting and the backing fabric, and I've already basted this with some pins. I quilt this with simple wavy lines using my walking foot. So I use my hands to wiggle my fabric to the left and to the right to create the wavy stitching line. I'm stitching horizontally, and I recommend to start somewhere around the center part of your quilt. As I'm approaching the opposite end, I will stop right on the seams of the border, just right here, and then pivot, and then stitch in the ditch to move to another spot, and then pivot again and start another stitching line. So I kind of like to let the lines to cross each other every now and then to add a little bit more interest and texture. Now feel free to quilt this as desired, so you can do any kind of designs that you prefer. You can do free motion quilting, and of course hand quilting will also work. And here I've already finished my quilting. Now I'm going to trim off all the excess batting and backing fabric. To make the hanging sleeves, you want to cut little fabric squares. About 5 inch or 6 inch square will work. I cut mine 6 inch squares. Now obviously you will only need to cut 2 pieces, but since I was a little indecisive which one will be the top and which one will be the bottom of the quilt, I went ahead and cut 4 pieces and installed the hanging sleeves on all sides, so I can always switch the look if I want to. Now let's fold this diagonally to create this little triangle. Now you want to position the triangle along the corner edges, aligning the raw edges with the raw edges of the quilt. Now you want to bear in mind though that this method will probably only work for a smaller size quilt, like wall hanging size quilt or little art quilt. Now let's repeat the same to the opposite side, and then stitch this in place with 1/8 inch of seam allowance. So you should end up with something like this, and this is where you're going to insert the hanging dowel. Now let's finish this little quilt with binding. So you can go ahead and bind this with your favorite binding method. So if you need a tutorial on how to bind a quilt, I will link a separate video if you wish to check it out. It should be somewhere down in the description box below. Alright, here I've already finished my binding, and I am so pleased with the final result, and I hope you will too with yours. And that's about it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next time. Goodbye!